Now, we've talked about the Bourbon reforms, and with the Bourbon reforms, you may remember that part of it was establishing colonies in the northern territories of the Spanish Empire in North America. Okay, so that includes California. Now, part of the reason that this decision was made was because there were threats from other competing European empires in North America. They may try to take the territory that was claimed by Spain. Okay, now this is not just in the minds of Jose de Galvez and the Spanish colonial officers. This is real. There really are competing European powers coming to North America and claiming territory. One of those European powers was Russia. Yes, the Russian Empire. Russia had already established colonies in the area of modern-day Alaska. They had enslaved a tribal group known as the Aleuts and were forcing them to hunt animals and take their furs, and then they were using those furs to trade with other European powers. And they were making quite a lot of money off of this fur trade, right? But they were oppressing peoples there in the north and going to war with other tribal peoples who attempted to stop the Russians from entering into their territory. Okay. Now, Russia wasn't just in Alaska, but they were also establishing colonies in California. In particular, one Russian colony was known as Fort Ross. Fort Ross is in Northern California. Now, the reason for Fort Ross was because Russia had a problem feeding their colonists there in Alaska. Okay, Alaska, not particularly the best place to grow food, right? It's not good for agriculture. So that's why the Russians wanted to establish Fort Ross in California so that they can grow food, and that food could be shipped up to Alaska for their colonies there, and they could feed the workers who are working for their fur company. Okay. Now, in California, there was interaction between tribal peoples and the Russians, all right, particularly a tribe known as the Pomo. The Russians attempted to force the Pomo to do their agricultural work for them. Okay, so it wasn't that, Russian farmers were there at Fort Ross growing food. No, they wanted to force local indigenous people to grow their food for them. Okay, and so they attempted to force the Pomo to do this, but many of the Pomo were able to escape from Fort Ross, and they simply just moved away from that area and didn't participate in growing food for the Russians. Other Pomo remained at Fort Ross, but they didn't have experience growing food, right? They weren't agriculturalists, they were hunter-gatherers. So the project really was not successful for the Russians. Eventually they had to abandon Fort Ross. But this was a threat to the Spanish Empire, because now you have this competing European power coming into your territory and establishing a colony. Who's to say that they might not establish more colonies in California? So this is one of the reasons why during the Bourbon reforms there was the order to establish colonies in California. All right, so you may remember Jose de Galvez, right, the inspector who came along and he was controlling New Spain for a period of time, and he made all these changes, and he wanted to start a colonization project there in California to protect the territory from competing European powers. So part of that colonization project was to establish Catholic missions in California to help to assimilate the native indigenous Californians, right, into Spanish culture and to help the Spanish colonial project, all right? So Jose de Galvez is going to send Gaspar de Portola, who is the explorer, who is going to explore Alta California, or California north of Baja California. And along with the Spanish explorer, Portola, you're also going to have a Franciscan missionary, Junipero Serra, or Father Serra. Maybe you've heard of him before. Okay. Now it's Father Serra who is going to start the Franciscan Catholic missions there in California. Okay. The first mission established was the Mission of San Diego. Yes, in 1769. Okay. Afterwards, you would have a mission established in Northern California in the area of modern-day Monterey. And then afterwards, you would have several other missions established over the years, about 21 missions in all in California. And so this was all part of the colonization project by the Spanish trying to colonize California to protect it from other European empires so that they wouldn't come and try to colonize the area themselves.